So I don't see anything on the CVent.
Yeah,
I wonder if that's just timed, if it knows that when it gets to a certain point.
Yeah. New message. What happened? New message. It's nothing. What is it? Okay. Okay. That's what it looks like. Oh, what's that? Needing one more screen.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can turn on my camera here. Where is that? Hey, look at that. It worked.
All right.
So this is a picture of Boston College, and I was over there. We're taking a campus tour. And
how's your daughter liking it?
She's liking it. She's gotten sick twice.
Oh, that's not fun.
Yeah, not been a lot of fun. And it's not gotten cold yet, so it's a good thing.
Yeah.
All right. Add session present. Add session? What's that? So how's this first session going to go? You have a lot of speakers.
It's gonna be quick. We were doing our dry run on Friday, Robert and I, with MCP. He's going to be doing most of the presentation because he's doing it more as an observer. And then we're going to flip it over to GeoComm. But 30 minutes will go by extremely quick.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to disconnect my phone and recall in because I should have connected to my user ID, but I pushed one too many digits, so.
No worries. Is it gonna? Are you gonna keep the Zoom on?
Yeah, I'll just keep my Zoom on, but my phone will connect to my user instead of to a separate person.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah. There we go.
Gotcha.
There's only 2 participants instead of 3.
Yeah, we removed him and booted that guy.
Get rid of that guy. Yeah.
So I updated my bio on the CVent page, did it this morning, and it looks like it never took effect. So I just have a ES and then my name.
Where did you attendees, expo, sponsors, exhibitors, more? Where would I find your bio on that page?
So if you go to the event,
there it is.
so the SIG session 1, you can see the list of speakers, and then they have
Oh, wait.
and text underneath them.
I went to the wrong session, that's why. Yeah, there we go. So you went to update this?
Yeah, I updated the so in your own personal profile you can update the bio, and it apparently did not. It's not showing anything on my end.
Okay. That's
No.
not
Not a deal breaker. Hey, Robert.
hello, Robert. Sorry, you're dropping food. Let's say it's what the clock says here. You're on Eastern Standard Time, right, Robert?
I am, that is correct.
So that's 1:49 over there.
Correct. I get in trouble if I leave crumbs on the floor, so I have to pick them up really fast. Otherwise, the boss won't let me eat in my office anymore.
We don't want that.
Nope.
Fortunate you have an office for one.
You
could
do.
Be sitting in your garage.
Then it wouldn't matter if I drop stuff on the ground, so.
Yeah.
But in about a week, that would be miserable because it's been getting down in the low 40s here at night.
It's already been freezing here.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Hello,
I know
Carrie.
the hey, Carrie.
Hey there, how's everybody doing today?
Good. Yourself?
Good. Speaking of weather, it is a cold and rainy day here in the middle.
What's the temp looking like?
It is 49 degrees Fahrenheit and rainy. It's supposed to get down, I think overnight to like mid 30s.
Not too bad.
We're all going to die.
Exactly.
I think in Phoenix.
In this
You don't
event.
have to do anything. That's what Brian is.
I'll get you in there. All right. So do you guys see my screen on the Zoom where it's one engagement platform for all audience? Okay. Let's see, Control 5, there's that. So join the session. So then I'm gonna join the session and mute over there. So we are live. Mute over there. All right, let me share the right screen. I don't know why it's not showing up. Weird. So, Eric, did you join as a
I did.
attendee? Okay. So I'm sharing my second screen, and it's still showing us.
But now I see what you're sharing.
The video, though, right?
Welcome session will begin shortly.
Oh, you see it that way. Weird. Why am I seeing it that way?
Oh, there we go.
I'm sharing my second.
So I can see it.
There we go. Okay.
And then I
I
see
can
a
see it
Dan
on
Craigie
my
down in the corner.
That took a long time.
It's been a while, Robert. How you doing?
I am super, Dan. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Yeah, doing well.
I'm going to turn off my video and I'll leave it up to Eric. If I can find that button.
Robert, do you have the ability to share your slide deck, or is that still
Hold on.
It still shows it as disabled. I'm still a participant.
Try now.
Ta-da.
There we go.
There it is.
And then Dan or Carrie, who will be sharing the slide deck from GeoComm?
I've got it up.
Okay. Brian, can you make Carrie host as well?
No, I can't anymore. I lost that ability since I gave it to Robert.
All right, let's see. If
So-
I go to Carrie, make co-host,
Yeah.
yes. So now you should have that ability too.
So if I just share my screen and I'm just doing this like not in presentation mode, can you see my
Yep.
screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
All
Yep.
right. Perfect.
All right. So Robert, why don't you start sharing your screen and we'll get going in 1 minute.
Do you want
I
to
have
do
about-
a kickoff, Brian, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I can do that. Just
Okay.
find that. All right, everyone, thank you for joining us. We're in NG911 Special Interest Group Session 1. Today we have Eric Shreves and Robert Horner presenting on the Arizona Strategic Plan to start with. And I won't read the details as you guys went to the session. You guys should see that. And then we'll have Eric and Carrie Brenneman with the indoor mapping for public safety starting at 10:30, I believe.
So, thanks, Brian. Do a quick introduction for myself. Good afternoon or good morning. My name's Eric Shreve. I'm a 911 network engineer for the state of Arizona with the 911 program. And we're going to be talking a little bit about our overall strategic plan update. This was an assessment that we contracted with Mission Critical Partners, who Robert will introduce himself shortly. And overall, it was looking at the state's overall posture as we move forward with next-gen 911 implementation, looking at an overview from the state going down to the locals and vice versa to see if we were heading in the right direction, and as well as ways to help that Mission Critical Partners could help remediate that or offer suggestions on ways to move forward with this. So this is looking at that one-year plan update and seeing where we're at as we move forward. I'll kick it off to Robert.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Like Eric said, we are at that 1 year mark, and we're looking at the statewide strategic plan. So this will be some guidance to the locals on what the state is doing and how they can align their local plan with the state. We're going to go through and review some of the existing GIS programs, both at the state and then at the local level. Update that strategic plan. Our goals have changed simply because we've achieved some of them, so we need to add more. And we're going to identify those milestones in this new plan. We have some funding priorities from the state level, as well as recommendations to the state for funding at the local level. And then we're going to talk about mitigating pressure from the vendor community as the locals start moving forward, and what can locals expect to see now that these gap analyses are being conducted. So on our end, there are two of us here at Mission Critical Partners who support this project, and there are three other support folks. Myself, I am the GIS subject matter expert, and then Jackie Mines, who is the project manager. She has the long-term relationship across several Arizona agencies and is managing this project. And then for the Arizona 911 program, Eric is the contact, the GIS contact, and then there are other folks as well. Eric, did you want to introduce them, or you want to just keep going?
Yeah, I'll just introduce the program manager, Travis Jensen. If you weren't aware, the program went through somewhat of an overhaul at the beginning of this year, and the change of leadership was reflected on that. So the 4 individuals that you see listed here bring different backgrounds as it relates to 911 and technology as a whole as it relates to public safety. But I'll just note Travis Jensen is our program manager. He's the one that's setting the directive and oversight over 911 across the state of Arizona as a whole.
Super, thank you. So our agenda, we already did the team introductions. We're going to talk about the strategic plan updates, the GIS gap analyses that we're doing at the local level, and then our updated implementation timeline. We will be taking questions at the end. You can also post, if you have a specific question on a slide, post it to the chat, and we can capture that and make sure it gets answered. So from the original Arizona Next Gen 911 roadmap, the vision is to deliver reliable and seamless 911 service to all of Arizona. That has not changed. That remains the vision of the 911 program. We did map out where this plan was going to target. We are still following this map. There were minor updates to this, but there are a lot of things that we have accomplished as we go through. So again, if you joined us last year at this time when we were introducing the strategic plan, this is the map that we drew out as we built the plan and all of the areas we wanted to cover, and we can start checking some of these off. So things from the strategic plan, GIS is the core of the next gen system. Not all GIS programs across the state are equal, and the success of the migration is dependent upon the locals being able to implement that GIS data. The guiding strategy remains the same. As far as what we've done along those lines, you can see that we have achieved quite a bit here. The green check marks are things that we have accomplished, but in the middle in gray, the technical approach, the state, AZGO, the cartographer's office, we have started down that path, but have not completed it yet. So that remains unchanged, but we have not fully implemented the tools and the training program for the tool set. So that is being rolled out. That is one spatial. And as that is rolled out, that check will also become green. The state will be looking for feedback on success of both the tool set and the training. And we will update this as with metrics on that success. So our stakeholders, we still have the same core principle. Arizona must work in a collaborative environment. We're talking about collaboration between jurisdictions, jurisdictions rolling up to a 911 system, between 911 systems, and then with 911 systems and the state. So various state agencies supporting this as well. It is not just the 911 program. And we want to make sure that that the 911 program and the stakeholders remain focused on this core principle. Our state partners, we have formed a partnership between the 911 program and AGIC, Arizona DOT, State Land, AZGO, and the one that we have not checked here is the Next Gen 911 GIS Technical Committee. That just has not been formalized yet, and that is the one that we are going to focus on building that partnership. How can the committee help 911? How can the 911 program help the committee? And how does that benefit the stakeholder community? So folks that are on that GIS technical committee, please stay tuned as we start to roll that outreach. On operations, the successful integration of GIS into the 911 community, we are in the process of doing that now, making recommendations with gap analyses as we go across the state. The 911 program is sponsoring that, and we are identifying areas where local GIS needs assistance in achieving a next-gen readiness. And the state is going to make determinations. Do they offer services? Do they build staff and offer service? Do they use funding mechanisms to empower the locals to do that themselves? Or is it some combination of that? How do they achieve that success? Also not checked in this box is the CLDXF standard. That was released by NENA a little bit premature in that CAD systems can't absorb data. Many CAD systems can't absorb data in the CLDXF format. So to avoid making a recommendation where jurisdictions would have to maintain 2 data sets or have to implement ETL tools to be able to support both NextGen and their CAD, the state has stepped back from that in the strategic plan. We are going to leave it in as a long-term goal, but for right now, that one has been put on the back shelf for now. And then once we finish these gap analyses, and we understand where the state can best support local and regional GIS programs, we'll roll out an education and training opportunities. And we will be relying on the 911 technical committee to help us identify locations where that's best applied. Staffing and training, the core principle again remains the same. The program will provide all stakeholders the training, the governance, the outreach support necessary. So if GIS is having problems with leadership, at their local jurisdiction, whether it's the elected officials or GIS is in a different agency than 911, how can the state best support the locals in building out that training? We develop training requirements. We have created a senior level position, that is Eric, to coordinate these efforts, and we are looking at additional positions. Those additional positions, there are 2 right now in the 911 program, and we may be creating more based on the recommendations from these gap analyses and how the state can best support the local GIS programs. And then that GIS work group, that will probably fall under the technical committee and focusing specifically on implementation and updating the strategic plan. All right, the next-gen GIS data core principle again remains the same, and we want to start focusing on interoperability of data between 911 systems. We want interoperable data across the entire state, so we can start focusing on what are the advanced capabilities of NextGen, as well as just making sure that NextGen is going to function within the state. We have our data stewards. We have I3 standard in WGS 84, and the tool set for geospatial data validation, that is OneSpatial, that is being rolled out now. And it is being rolled out according to go live. So if you are not aware of the OneSpatial application, it is coming your way. And then geospatial data sharing methodology. We are looking at how we're going to use AZGeo and the tools that are available to us to make sure that that is rolled out as efficiently as possible, but we have accepted that or adopted AZGeo as that platform. Next Gen Core Services transition, the core principle again remains the same. SI providers must utilize the same GIS data so that GIS data is validated locally and cross-jurisdictionally. We will use that one spatial tool. We will have the same Next Gen Core Services provider data for all 911 systems across the state. All right, the in-depth assessment. So if we haven't gotten to you yet, and we do have 3 more coming up next week, but we are, MCP and the 911 program are visiting every 911 system across the state. And the goal there is to find every possible thing that could go wrong in the next gen implementation. We understand and fully support that and fully believe that the 911 systems are capable of supporting their E911. That's where you are now. It is a huge leap up to next gen 911. And that huge leap is going to require some improvements in applications, in staffing, in documentation across each of the 911 systems. So these are very critical assessments. Their purpose is to identify risk and gaps in success, and it in no way reflects the current capabilities, but it is meant to help identify what could possibly go wrong within the next year as systems start to go live. So we're going to fully develop and implement system components based on these assessments. And it's supposed to support regionalization of the data. And we want to make sure that there's a funding stream for state-sponsored systems. So this is not a mandate, an unfunded mandate. This is the state is sponsoring this program. They're sponsoring AZGO. They are sponsoring local data improvement projects. There are grant applications, funding requests are coming in, and we want to make sure that if we have $1 million in funding requests and only $800,000 in budget, that we can show to the state that we need additional funding in the 911 program because these are the items that are going to go unfunded if we don't have that increase in budget. These are the items that are going to go undone if we don't increase the staffing at the state level to fully support this, and then be able to turn that back to locals and say in the local program, they have to have this staffing increase, or these 2 or 3 jurisdictions would benefit from sharing a regional resource because they can only use 20% of the time, or 30% at another jurisdiction of a person's time. All right, standards and best practices. Arizona has done a fantastic job of developing local standards based on national standards. Some of them follow to the letter, some of them are more strict, but I think that that Arizona is well aligned with where they need to be for statewide interoperability. It's now rolling those standards down to all of the GIS data that goes into Next Gen 911. So we do have participation in national and state work groups. We do have AGIC and is working with local GIS. What we don't have is GIS standards and workflows at the 911 program at the state level yet. And so just like the locals that we visited so far who are lacking some documentation, the state is as well. And we are working towards that goal and making sure that that documentation is in place as we identify the gaps and how we're going to move forward. All right, funding, that's the big question on everybody's mind, is how are we going to pay for all of these upgrades? You know, the next gen needs that constant data creation and maintenance. How are we going to make sure that that is funded? How are we going to make sure that there's no gaps in that data maintenance going forward. How is the state going to do that? We need to formalize the funding requests and implement a master services contract. So the state will put forth a master services contract that includes all of the things that we have identified as gaps at the local level. We can write a white paper for the locals that tells how you can format that request, what is eligible for funding, and how you're going to break that down, and then is there a local matching funds requirement, and then it shows the need for a project management plan and how are you going to write that project management plan. There have been a lot of documentation requests or requirements that have been identified through these gap analyses. One of the things that MCP is pushing off onto the state is the state needs to provide templates for all of these. If you want a project management plan and you want it to be consistent, provide a template for the locals to use. Give me templates for our intergovernmental agreements. And how will those be written? So we are working to create a repository of those templates. We have a few in draft form already, and so we will have those up there. The one thing we are currently doing is the program, 911 program, has a coordinator and is managing existing contracts, and this new master services contract will be managed in the same way. So you'll be able to make purchases off of that. And just because it is not an eligible expense for 911 funds, there will be items on that master services agreement contract that are not eligible, but still the state could add that on to pass on savings to the locals in the economy of scale, but won't be reimbursed through 911 funds. So we will be very careful to identify those that can and those that are ineligible for that funding, but we want to make it well known that if there are other things that would benefit the locals to be on a master services agreement, we want to make sure that we are encompassing all of those. Now I'm going to pause here for questions before I go on, and I'm going to take a drink because that was a lot of talking.
One of the questions I have, Robert, I'm not seeing anything on the chat that's coming up, but one of the questions I have is, based on findings that we've done through the gap assessment that is an underlying part of this strategic plan, if you could kind of summarize in a couple sentences, what are some of the things you're seeing as an observer that works with multiple states, multiple localities across the country that you're seeing is specifically unique to Arizona? Could you kind of summarize that?
Absolutely. The first one that jumps out at me is the multiple addressing authorities and the lack of addressing coordination. It's not unique to Arizona in that we've seen it in many other places. What is unique is how quickly you go from urban to rural in Arizona. There seems to be a hard line where urban just stops and all of a sudden you're in the middle of nowhere, and we see a smoother transition in most places. So transitioning that addressing and capturing that addressing information and making sure that it's consistent across an entire 911 system is going to be a challenge, as well as making sure that those address creation and maintenance is rolled up very quickly from the addressing authority to GIS and into the EZINet. And that coordination is extremely difficult when you get into the tribal nation territories where that information isn't freely shared, or less frequently shared than in the urban and suburban areas. And so we've We're working on ideas for to get that done. We have seen several success stories with the development of a web-based tool set that requires no GIS training, and an addressing authority can go in and use that tool to estimate or identify what the address should be, create the submission. It creates a workflow and a tracking capability that you can see who has touched it, who has approved it, and where it is. And then that data gets converted into geospatial format at the end and can be uploaded. And that takes a process from a week down to a day to a few hours in some cases, and so we will be making recommendations like that. And then, of course, staffing and documentation are two of the big ones. The speed with which data needs to be verified, updated, and turned around and put back into the ESInet in the next year or so, we're talking about a 3-day turnaround on that. No more monthly or quarterly updates. And that's not just for your jurisdiction, but you need to be able to pull in data from your neighboring jurisdiction as we start to build alternate routing or policy routing rules into the ESInet, so that if a call center is overwhelmed by the number of calls or goes dark for any reason, the calls are automatically rolled over to another 911 center. So I think those are the two biggest ones. And then everyone's favorite is that documentation. Do you have a local strategic plan? Do you have workflows in place, and SOPs, agreements with the agencies that provide you data? You know, having those all in place, especially in a job market where GIS folks are in high demand, lots of open positions and not enough people to fill them, you know, or even the $80 million Powerball ticket, which, if any of you win, you have to share with me. You know, any of those jobs can turn over very quickly.
Great, thank you. And I'll just add to the last part. If you weren't aware, the state of Arizona did award a contract for Next Gen 911. It's a two-part piece, one being Next Gen Core Services. That's the part GIS is supporting for geospatial call routing. And then the second is the call handling equipment. That's the actual hardware that is in the PSAPs that dispatchers use. So things are moving quickly in the state. Obviously, we have some lofty goals that we're aiming for, but obviously the coordination and collaboration across the state and working with our locals and partners is going to be the key to success. And, you know, just one of the things that, you know, I keep reiterating is that we're looking at areas of opportunities we can help by any means. You know, if we're looking at a county that is one GIS person, you know, we're seeing how can the state, specifically for 911, how can we support on that effort? And overall, through this strategic plan and this gap assessment that we're conducting, these are things that we're going to be striving for.
Robert, there are a couple questions in the session here for you.
Okay.
One is, beyond documentation templates that are being recommended, what type of training is being recommended to local agencies?
Okay. For the actually I'm not Brian Bond's question. I am not able to see any of the questions, so thank you very much, Mariah, for reading that out. Beyond the templates, a strategic plan is number one. If you are going for local funding, if you want locals to understand, or local administrators, elected officials, if you want them to understand why GIS is so important to Next Gen and why you're coming in and asking for more money for this program, having that strategic plan, showing that it aligns with the state strategy and outlining the items from your gap analysis that that you need to overcome in order to be successful at NextGen. Those items in that strategic plan and being able to hand them, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do have supporting documentation, and here is my 5-year plan for achieving this. And these are short-term items that have to be done in the next year because our jurisdiction is going live in X number of months, and this is what we estimate. And so having that laid out really gives you a good leg up on getting those approved. And then the other item is having those workflows developed, your standard operating procedures developed. So when you do get that funding and you bring someone in, they can hit the ground running with documentation, and you don't have a lot of other things that need to be done.
Thank you. The second question looks like Eric responded in the chat, so that one's taken care of.
Excellent. I know we went through that fast. We only had 30 minutes to cover it, but you know, please submit any other questions you have, any other comments, and if something that you think should be in the top 10 for the state to consider, send those in, and we will evaluate those and get them into the next round of strategic plan updates.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Robert. All right, Brian, if you want to switch.
We're ready.
Are you guys seeing my screen yet?
Yes, we are.
We are.
All right, perfect. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate you joining us. My name is Carrie Brennan. I am a product manager with GeoComm, and my coworker, Dan Craigie, is joining us. And we are actually going to chat with you about the value of indoor maps. So I'm going to turn things over to Dan to really kind of get us kicked off.
Carrie, thank you, and happy to be here today. So before we get started in talking about indoor maps, just wanted to provide a little bit of information about GeoComm. I'm not going to read off all these bullet points, but really suffice it to say, we are a public safety GIS company. We've been doing this for a while. We have customers all over the United States, and some, actually international. Very passionate about public safety and public safety innovation in particular. So I think that's where indoor maps really falls into play is, how do we innovate? How do we make things better in public safety? And it's the partnerships that we have that are listed here and the experience and skill set that we bring to the industry. So Carrie, let's move forward here and we can talk about really the gist of why we're here. And really, there's a problem that we've identified, and we're not alone in identifying this. But as far as location information within public safety and 911, there's a gap that exists. And so to really set the stage about why we think indoor maps are critical, some information here just for the attendees of this webinar to understand. This is a national statistic here in the US, but it's likely true all over the world, maybe even more so in some entities, but 80% of 911 calls are from cell phones. Historically, cell phone location isn't great, so that has presented challenges to public safety in providing a response. But then, bringing that indoors, this is a pre-COVID study done by the federal government, is that 80% of our lives are spent indoors, which is kind of a sobering statistic. I hope I don't spend 80% of my life indoors, but if you think about it, between work, I'm inside, sleeping, most of my dinners and meals are inside, it really starts to add up. And indoor environments can be complex, whether it's a home or an industrial park. Providing an emergency response can be difficult within an indoor location. So we know that historically, from cell phones in particular, call location information really isn't great. And then to provide a response indoors, honestly, can be tricky. So that's the problem that we're dealing with in public safety. So Carrie, if we go on to the next slide, there is more accurate location information now being shared. However, if you think about rapid deploy, rapid SOS, you have device-based hybrid location that's being shared with public safety. The wireless carriers themselves are really getting on board. A recent FCC ruling is essentially mandating that wireless carriers provide a more accurate location to public safety. So knowing historically that was an issue, what we're seeing in the last, honestly, 2 years to even the last 3 months is a vast improvement in the location information that's available to public safety. But with that said, and Carrie, let's go back to that last slide real quick. You have that really accurate dot, but if we're talking about an indoors location, it's really not providing a whole lot of context, right? If you're in the middle of the field, so be it, this is going to be helpful. But without an indoor map, an indoor position like this is showing is just kind of a blue dot on what we think is a blank whiteboard. So what do we do about this? GeoComm focusing on innovation, wanting to make a difference. We have an indoor map service that we've created. So Carrie, if you go to the next slide, we can see kind of what that general high-level overview is of what this, what we're offering, and Carrie's going to get into the details here. But the way that we see it, and this is, we're focusing on public safety, but this very much can be applicable to other industries that need indoor context. There is information available about buildings. GeoComm specializes in creating GIS data and then delivering out. Again, our focus is public safety, but it can be any other industry as well to provide that situational awareness. So that's what we see where we're filling that gap. There's this great location information now coming in. The context isn't there. GeoComm is going to step up and make sure that we provide this. But Carrie, why don't you take us here in the middle of the presentation on a little bit more about what that process looks like.
Yeah, so the process that we have put in place is basically a workflow that we work through with you, where having access to good quality and high quality, either PDFs, JPEGs, DWGs, that information gets uploaded into our system. It goes through a process where there's data development, data creation using some of our patent pending machine learning and AI processes. That data is, it goes from being a static screenshot to being actionable GIS data that goes through a really high level of quality control that is then delivered out to the user in multiple different formats. We're going to talk about some of those formats a little bit later on in the presentation, but really what we're doing is helping to take information like what we've got on the screen right now, floor plans, and convert them into actionable GIS data. So in looking at the screen that we've got up in front of us, the image on the left-hand side of the screen is what we would consider an effective floor plan resource. It has been, in this case, it's a PDF that's been derived directly from a CAD drawing, but it has on it all of the components that are needed to build out effective GIS and geospatially derived floor plans. So it has all of the rooms marked with labels. It has all of the doors properly marked. If you look at the floor plan on the right-hand side of the screen, we would consider this an ineffective floor plan. The reason for that is you'll notice that the image is actually skewed. More than likely, it has been a photocopy of a plan that has been reconverted into a PDF format or some other image format. The doors are just open spaces. There's also a lot of noise on it from what appears to be hand-drawn notes that have been, over time just obscured. When we georeference this to the Earth's surface, because it has been skewed, it may not align appropriately. And we're looking for public safety grade GIS data when it comes to our floor plans. Now, this happens to be another example of a floor chart or a diagram. Perhaps this would be something that you might see in a hotel on the back of a door. If we look closely at this data source, this is actually not an ideal data source. The reason for that is if you look where you've got like the girls' locker room, boys' locker room over on the right-hand side of the screen, that entire side of the building has been compressed. There's a lot of skewing of this data. And again, when we try to georeference this to either a building footprint or align it with the appropriate aerial photography, this just would not be a good resource, a good primary resource, I will say. Now, in terms of it being a good secondary resource for doing data conversion, it absolutely is, because it does have the location of fire alarms, fire extinguishers, AEDs, what we consider public safety content that we want to put in front of the telecommunicators. So this would be a good secondary resource in this particular case. Ultimately, though, if we could get CAD drawings, that is going to be, I will say, the ultimate resource, because we do have the ability to go in, turn off all of the data layers that we do not need in the conversion process, and get down just directly to the rooms that we have that we want to convert. So we're stripping out all of that noise, if you will. This is a list of the different symbols that we utilize within our data creation, data conversion, and data display. So these are standard symbols across the buildings that any telecommunicator, any dispatcher would be able to recognize. They are based off of the NAPSIG symbol set that have been put in place for standardization of GIS symbology across the board. And we do have what we consider the public safety features. So AED locations, first aid kits, card readers, gas and water shutoffs, the type of information that a telecommunicator may want to let a first on scene first responder know where these items are. And these are, I'll say, the symbols are not ever changing, but the symbol set is changing as we convert more and more buildings. One of the items that we don't have listed out here are things like baggage claim for airports when we do airport conversions. That's an important thing from a facilities standpoint. But really, we're focusing specifically on public safety in this particular case. And what does this look like in the hands of a telecommunicator? Well, the end result is you get something that looks like this. Now, this happens to be a one-story mall, and it's in St. Cloud, Minnesota, where GeoComm is based out of. And from here, you can see that not only do we have a nice two-dimensional representation of the mall, we also have a floor picker. Now this again happens to only be a one-story mall, so there's only one floor to visualize in this case, but that's really what the end result would look like. This
And-
is,
and-
oh, sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Sorry, Carrie, I just wanted to kind of add into here, and I know we have a demonstration coming up, Carrie, that you'll lead. You know, in many ways, just showing this, you've likely seen this representation in other platforms, but I think the fact that this is GIS data, and you'll get into the maintenance option, malls change really frequently, stores, configurations, and our goal is to make that really easy to change. So when I actually walked this mall, I was testing, and this happened to be a rapid SOS call. I did the testing here. And in many ways, and I think we'll see again in the demonstration, the accuracy of the georeferenced GIS data is really critical here, knowing that a dispatcher, if they're answering a 911 call, can literally tell if they're in a particular store or not, which is not really something that they have access to now. There's a lot of guessing. My sister, who is a dispatcher here in Minnesota, you know, tries to take as much data and tools that she has available to make, again, the best possible decision, but having this in her tool set would really be a game changer because it's just so clear, again, where that caller's coming from versus where their actual location is in the mall. But I just wanted to kind of step in, Carrie, and share that story.
No, you're absolutely right. And as Dan said, one of the important things is the maintenance of data. So yeah, you may be thinking to yourself, oh, well, you know, in my 911 center, they have the PDFs of the CAD drawings or the PDF scans of a building for a school or, you know, a mall, whatever it might be. And that's great, but those are only as current as the last time that was produced. And as Dan mentioned, there are so many changes that occur in buildings that having that good data maintenance in place is critical to ensure that the information that's in front of our first responders is absolutely current. You know, updating things like room names and numbers, the uses of them, the location of public safety features such as AEDs. This happens to be a picture of an AED along a long corridor. But, you know, 6 months from now, this area could get renovated and that AED may end up, you know, on the opposite side of this large room. So being able to continuously update that also plays into what we refer to as our data integrity policy. And putting into the hands of the GIS people who are being charged with maintaining this data, the tools and the knowledge to update this information is critical. So one of the things that we do is in our data model, we have an effective date and a primary contact, primary maintenance contact that is populated. We run automated processes basically 9 months after the effective date on an annual basis. The customer notifies us if there are any changes. If there are changes, they can go in and use the maintenance tools to update that data. Otherwise, if there's no communication back at all, the effective date does not change. And so year over year, a building may not have any changes to it. If you notify us, we'll update that expiration date. If you don't, then after a set period of time, basically we picked 5 years, we'll actually mark that data as expired. It will still be available in our content library, but it will be marked differently so that, again, a telecommunicator telling somebody that's first on scene that, you know, the hot topics may no longer be hot topics is still useful information to have in front of you. So Dan did mention that we're going to do a demo. One of the things that we have done is we have partnered with Rapid SOS and made our GeoComm Maps application with indoor maps available to any one of the 4,800 plus emergency communication centers within the United States. So this happens to be just the Rapid SOS portal, and I'm going to play just this little video and talk through it. So as a 911 call comes in, you'll see the location of the 911 call, but there's no context. As Dan said, there's just a dot on the map. Is that the middle of a field, or is there an actual building there? As we go into the GeoComm Maps interface, what we see, because we do know from the device-based hybrid location that our uncertainty factor is approximately 2.5 meters. So the bullseye is the location that the call is coming from. I'm pretty confident that the call came from Ragstock in this case. We also have listed out locations of additional items like rear entrance doors, major doors. All of the rooms within a building are color coded based on their use. So areas that are not accessible to the public, like maintenance rooms, the sprinkler room, or even tenant storage, are all going to be color coded differently. In this case, the restrooms are also color coded in a blue shade. We also have listed out the locations of stairs, escalators, elevators, anything like that that is needed for those first responders. So having this available at a telecommunicator's fingertips is going to be a game changer. Now, something that has done a lot for changing the game is a case study that we want to bring to your attention, which takes place, it's in Denton County, Texas. So Denco 911, which is a very large PSAP within Denton County. And Dan, I'm going to turn things over to you to go through some of this information.
Thanks, Carrie. So yeah, Denco 911 was an early adopter for indoor maps. They saw the value. Their telecommunicators, again, knew of the gap that we spoke of earlier, in that they were receiving wireless 911 calls in particular, and really couldn't, confidently say where that caller was coming from, especially from an indoor space. So this is where indoor maps enter in. It's a relatively large 911 district, north of kind of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, serving almost 1 million people in a number of jurisdictions in North Texas. So in late 2019, started this project, really focused on schools for a variety of reasons. In our market research with public safety practitioners and really the general public, public schools in particular always come up as first and foremost the one building type that we want to focus on and we want to protect initially. And there are many others as well, but schools are a big focus here. So wanting to solve that challenge of locating 911 callers and really just saying, hey, what can we do with mapping? Let's take it to that next generation, and that's where indoor mapping came from. So then, what were some of the goals? What did we do? Carrie, if we go to the next slide. Again, wanted to focus on schools. It's just been validated that those are one of the more important building types. So it was a process. It was talking about the urgency of needing this, communicating with stakeholders in the community, educational leaders, and general citizens. Privacy is always a concern within education. So knowing that these indoor maps are going to be made only to public safety individuals, they weren't going to be shared with anyone else. Making sure schools understood the reality of a 911 call. A lot of people just, they watch CSI and they think, hey, if I call 911, they know exactly where I'm at, and that's not always the case. So providing that education, understanding why we needed these floor plan resources, making sure the quality that Carrie talked about earlier was there, and then doing that conversion process and working with the schools and the public safety entities to make sure that flow of data was consistent and everyone understood their role. So at this time, 86 schools have been mapped. So within that 911 region, there are 86 schools where if a call occurs, the telecommunicator is going to have that indoor awareness to very confidently send first responders, and they can say they are in the auditorium or they are going to be on the second floor in room 202. And that's really something that isn't very popular right now around public safety, but DENCO is in the lead in implementing this project. So, you know, going to what's next, I think is our next slide. Carrie, I know you're working with DENCO on some next steps. You can share what some of those are.
Yeah, so, you know, some of them are to obtain and develop additional area schools. So DENCO had really focused on their public schools. They're starting to look at private schools, look at ensuring that they are getting the right resources in to do this data conversion, as well as looking at converting government buildings, healthcare facilities, event venues. You know, Texas A&M is a school that is located in the DENCO 911 area. So that campus has a large number of buildings, things like large stadiums as well. We are working on a proof of concept for utilizing the Z-axis. And as we know, based on what has come out with the FCC, as of June, all of the major carriers, or the top 3 major carriers, have started to deliver Z-axis data in their alley stream in one form or another. So that's great, but not necessarily something that is actionable in the ECC at the moment. So we're working on taking that information, converting it into again, actionable information. And then also working on a proof of concept utilizing data collection for buildings without floor plans, using things like indoor LiDAR scanners, GPS data collection. All of those are happening at the moment. And we're really excited to see what is going to be coming about, not just in DENCO, but across the United States and beyond with indoor maps. Now, something that some of you might be thinking about is, you know, I'm still just trying to get my points, lines, and polygons for Next Gen 911 in a shape that can be utilized in the EZInet. Well, that's true. You know, you may still be working on that project, but you really should be considering looking at indoor maps. It doesn't have to be I'll say a monumental project. What you're really looking at is just another GIS data layer that you are adding to your system. And, you know, that's something that can be really beneficial. As well, you can look at, and as Dan mentioned earlier, not just utilizing this data for public safety, but are there facilities management needs? Are there other needs within your enterprise where doing a data conversion project, data conversion and data maintenance, that is, where those would be available and accessible across multiple different groups within your enterprise. So why indoor maps? Again, we are, from a GeoComm standpoint, we are public safety focused. Our first and foremost primary initiative is to put in the hands of telecommunicators and public safety the tools and the data that they need in order to do their job effectively. We do have 24/7 technical support. Although indoor maps today are not mission critical for Next Gen 911, that doesn't mean that they won't be in the not so distant future. Again, accurate and actionable GIS data. This is no longer just a scan of a building footprint or a building, but it is actionable GIS data. I did mention that we do have that patent pending technology, and I'm trying to be very cognizant of time because I do know that there are some questions. So I'm just going to quickly kind of flip through. We do have a low-cost solution for doing data conversion. We utilize the standard and most current data models. The data does belong to you. And then we do ensure that we have leading edge security and focus on uptime. So I I do see a couple of questions in the chat dialog box. Eric, you asked if there are any public safety entities implementing location tracking and sensor solutions on mobile units. Because Z-Access has really just started to come into play recently, I am not familiar with very many that have started implementing location tracking and sensor solutions. I do know that some public safety agencies have their some of their units actually call 911. And as Dan mentioned, then it allows you to do tracking directly through the Rapid SOS portal. You do need to have that indoor data visible though. Otherwise, again, it's just a dot on the map. Pardon me. Is the indoor standard defined yet for the indoor color selections? Not that I am aware of, Tom. We picked those colors based on the standard colors that we were seeing in the NAPSIG schema. I will say this as well. I sit on the NINA 3D GIS data model work group, and that is currently reviewing comments. So the 3D working group will be coming out with a published document, I would say sometime in 2020. Question about—
Carrie, if you could answer Shauna's question. She's been waiting. She was one posted in the chat.
Sure. Do buildings need indoor sensors for first responders to find calls? Technically, no, they do not, because you could have an indoor map available and then utilizing something like the breadcrumbs from a 911 call utilizing Rapid SOS, which is basically the device-based hybrid location. If you are going to be doing routing, that's when you would need to have those indoor sensors in place. And we are completely out of time, I believe. Am I correct on that, Mariah?
Yeah, I can speak, Carrie. Yeah, we are at the top of the hour. I believe the questions will still be there if you want to stay on a couple minutes and address any of those. I just know people can't submit any. Yeah.
I am happy to stay on and answer any questions as well. You've got Dan's and my contact info on the screen. Feel free to email us. We'd be happy to answer any questions for you.
I think we can only see it off the chat. I don't think anyone can come up on audio. So if there's anything that specific that you see in the chat that can be answered, that would be helpful.
And nothing in the chat, just those two questions left in the Q&A.
Okay. Well, Carrie, Dan, I appreciate it. I know that was a sprint. That there was a lot of good content out of that, and Robert, as well as speaking on the strategic plan. I really do appreciate it. And that is the end of our presentation.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Back at 1.
Cheers. Thank you.
For the,
Thanks again, guys. Appreciate it.
We'll be back at 1 o'clock for the second session of the special interest group.